Hi, I'm Reid, editor of the Edison Report and an NLB board member. We are here for our 12th annual lighting forum. The name of this session is Lighting is Too Hard. I am joined by Naomi Miller, recently retired from PNNL, and Mary Beth Gotti, the chair of the National Lighting Bureau. Ladies, welcome.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
So Mary Beth, Naomi, the three of us were last together at IES 25, the lighting conference, and there was, I thought, an incredible brainstorming session. Can you tell us kind of where we are now with that brainstorming session and what the next steps are?
Well, let's just describe the brainstorming session. We had pretty much everybody attending the conference in a single room. We presented the frustrations of why lighting is too hard, and then we allowed each of the tables to choose a topic that they wanted to brainstorm over. So, just as an example, a number of the tables talked about the fact that when there's value engineering on a product or on a project, the contractor will come to the specifier and say, okay, we want to substitute this product for what you specified. We want you to approve it. Well, in order to do that, you have to have a whole lot of information about that product to see if it's comparable to the product that you specified. So if you've got spec sheets that are very different, or information on the drivers and the control systems that are very different, it's very hard to parse them. Wouldn't it be useful, the tables suggested, if we had some spec sheets that had common information in common places on the spec sheets so that you could quickly compare two products and see whether they are comparable in performance? That's just one of many, many suggestions that came out of that wonderful session.
Mary Beth, do you want to share anything?
I was just, thinking about, product LED product longevity, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. But the misconception that these particular LED solutions are going to last forever, or they're not going to fail on my shift anyhow. Let's put it that way. And so, looking at ways, how do you know, for example, how long a product is, how long it's been operating? Marking original performance after a long install time. How long has this luminaire actually been operating? Is there a spot replacement versus whole space replacement that's needed in a given space? Interoperability, replaceable parts. If something fails, how can I determine how to replace those parts? So the whole product longevity was a key one, and how to ensure that you're in fact going to get satisfactory long-term performance out of these solutions.
Naomi, you've looked at a lot of the information. I think there were maybe 30 tables, if I'm correct, and there was a lot of data. Tell our audience what is happening with that and kind of how you see the next steps with that information and solving these problems.
Well, you may remember, Randy, that we had a scribe at each table, and the job of the scribe was to write down which frustrating problem the table was wrestling with and to just quickly describe what would it look like if this problem were fixed, and how do we get to fixing that problem? What are the steps that you have to go through? So we have transcribed all of the information from each of the scribes at the tables, and we have consolidated them into groups of suggestions that address a single topic. So one topic. One topic is that if you have a control system, you may have a proprietary control system. That's very common. There are only a few control systems that are kind of open source. What can we do to make control systems more interoperable? So, for example, how, when you put a driver into a system for a proprietary control system? How do you make sure that driver is going to take the proprietary controls protocols and send the right information to the LEDs? How do you do that? Well, one of the great suggestions that came out of our session was maybe this is a job for AI. AI could possibly read the signal that is coming into the driver from the proprietary controls manufacturer, and it can say, oh, I know this is the proprietary control that belongs to brand X, and therefore I know what these controls are telling the driver to do. I'm going to translate it into a more common language and send that to the LEDs so they'll know what to do. So it can be a transparent kind of thing built into every one of the drivers. It's a way to get more interoperability without forcing manufacturers to perhaps give up their proprietary systems.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's take one subject that I remember a lot, and I think you will too. Right to repair. There was just so much discussion about that, and I think Lance Bennett, outside of our discussion, at his tabletop, was doing a survey about what does it mean, right to repair. How would you see that happening? Would you see it happening first, maybe with a type of light, maybe downlights, that there would have to be a right to repair for downlights? And who would be in charge of making that right to repair a requirement?
Question. It
I mean,
seems,
that's $1 million question, right? Who's going to
yeah,
start? Who
yeah.
has the teeth to make it? Is it a DLC thing? Is it an IES thing? Is it DOE and the government? Who's going, or does the industry together say we want to have a right to repair, and these are kind of the guiding principles we're going to use?
I think you've nailed it. It's a very sticky issue. And one thing we need is buy-in from the manufacturers because they don't want to lose any advantage they have in the market, and that's understandable. So, how could we get all the parties into a room and figure out a resolution that all the manufacturers can buy into? Something that gives the user a right to repair, but at the same time doesn't take away the manufacturer's proprietary system. I don't know what the solution is, but I know that we've got to get multiple manufacturers talking to each other to get some resolution. Mary
And
Beth, do you have
talking
any
to
suggestions?
and talking to manufacturers, certainly the more reputable ones from the residential point of view, certainly, but they do repair them. You know, people send them back. They will take the initiative to fix them and then return them. And I also, it's all a lot of it's related to education, isn't it? And if you're going to go and buy a very inexpensive luminaire or sets of luminaires, 10, 20 bucks, whatever, then you know what? They're not going to be repairable. Guess what? But it's really the higher end, and if you educate people, look, you buy this particular luminaire, let's say, this part's replaceable, that part's replaceable. You can ensure you're going to get full lifetime performance out of this. And if you saying I don't really care, I just want something, and when it's done, I'll throw it out. I mean, I think the customer and the consumer is always going to have to make that decision. I mean, that's
So
been like
maybe
that way.
it sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it's almost a voluntary right to repair. And maybe there could be a certification that this fixture meets right to repair. The driver can be
There you
repaired,
go.
the module can be replaced. And then I would think, if you start out voluntary, then it could become so important that everybody wants to do it. Um, do you see your organization, the NLB, would that be something that they would ever want to undertake?
I think that would be a great opportunity to have some educational modules on that. Absolutely, to help try to help push the effort forward. Okay,
Okay,
so
Maybe a label, a right to repair label.
right.
yeah,
But
great
you'd have
idea.
to have criteria. You'd have to, have the
Right.
manufacturers and stakeholders involved to define the criteria. And then an organization such as the NLB or other organizations
Yeah.
might come up with that certification or that label, right to repair. And then lighting designers could have a choice if they what they wanted to specify, and then hopefully users could have a choice. I think that
Exactly.
might be the starting gate, the starting point.
And the ALA is an organization of lighting showrooms. It could certainly be a selling point if someone walks into the showroom and they're able to say, every one of the products that we have in this showroom are repairable. If something fails, you can bring it back in and we will help you figure out how to repair it. Whether it's sending it back to the manufacturer who has agreed to service it if there's a problem, or we'll figure out another repair facility. Remember, we used to have TV repair dudes. Um,
Right.
maybe we need lighting repair dudes.
That's funny.
It's a possibility, but what we need to talk, we need to figure out what are the solutions, because it's not just one solution for all of these problems. It's a number of solutions. Maybe if we get together on huge Zoom calls or in person, we can figure it out.
There is a company I understand in England that is really starting this whole, it's like a reclamation process for kind of renovating luminaires, if you will. And we just had this discussion a couple days ago, but there are issues with trying to fix a luminaire that no longer works. The National Electric Code is one example. You don't want people getting hazardous luminaires because they've been trying to fix them, not just replacing a driver, which we should be able to do, or replacing a light engine. But if you're physically trying to take apart a luminaire and add different parts than it was originally intended, there's some real issues with that.
And Mary Beth, I think the company you're referring to is called Stone Lighting. And I have met them and I've heard them speak at various conferences. And you're right, that's what they do, and they do a great job of it. Well, we continue hearing about competition from cheaper imported lighting products. Is there a quality and durability problem that exists from that?
It used to be that we would say, oh, those are manufactured offshore and they're cheap pieces of garbage. That's not necessarily true anymore. An awful lot of very expensive, good quality stuff is also manufactured offshore, but there are some less reputable manufacturers. They still theoretically need to meet UL standards or ETL standards, National Electric Code standards for bringing product into the US market, but that's a low bar. There are some products that are very poorly made, and there is no company that is going to stand behind them if they fail in 2 years.
And
Right.
one of the other issues is that, again, we're not talking about the more reputable manufacturers, but there's some they'll lie. They'll say, oh, yeah, it passes FCC, it passes ETC, it passes UL, and they don't. It's just a fake label. So that's a risk as well.
Right. But there are some cool innovations in lighting products. And how do we teach the public about these new products?
Education and coming up with communication vehicles that can put lighting into simple enough terms that the average person can understand them. And that really is one of the key, key initiatives that the NLB wishes to pursue, as certainly as we move into 2026.
Here's an example of what we need to do in the residential market to make things clearer for the consumer. CCT. All of us lighting nerds, we know what CCT means. It's a degree of warmth or coolness from the light source. But you ask the average person standing in a big box store selecting light bulbs what 2700K means, they look at you like you've landed from Mars. So why can't we develop some labeling for consumer products that makes it much clearer what some of these esoteric terms mean?
So, what happened, Naomi, to lighting facts? That seemed to make a lot of sense.
Yes, that was a label developed by the DOE early in the LED days, probably 2007, 2008. And that was a color label that had certain information on it, like it had CCT, but it also had a gradation of color so that you knew that 2700K was kind of an orangey warm color and 5000K was a bluish color. It also had a number for color quality, which actually was publication of the CRI. So you could tell within reason whether you were getting a better color quality product or less so. That label that had information on watts and lumens and that sort of thing, it was dumbed down a little bit by the FTC. So when the FTC required consumer light bulbs to have that label on it, they eliminated the color quality. They eliminated the color that would suggest whether it was warm or cool visually. So that label is still on boxes, but it's not as useful as it used to be. And at this point in time, we've got better metrics. For example, we have TM30 metrics that might be better for communicating color quality.
But Naomi, let me
Maybe that
interject, Naomi.
label,
Let me
yeah,
interject on the TM30. I agree,
yep.
but how in the world can you get a consumer to understand TM30 when they're looking at a small box, in a store?
Well, there may be other, we could use RF instead of CRI, for example. If you talked about color quality using RF, that might do the trick, but we would be using a metric that works better for LEDs than CRI ever did.
Okay, it's a good point. It's a very good point. Who in the industry can help with this? Who can take the lead? Is it the DOE again?
Unfortunately, the DOE right now is losing funding for lighting, so I'm not sure that's the right group to make that determination right now. Maybe in the future. Um, right now, I think there are going to have to be other groups that step in to do the same thing. So perhaps the ALA is an important group, perhaps the IES is an important group, the ILD is an important group. There may be some electrical engineering groups that could contribute to this. I think there are multiple technical societies and design groups that could come together to produce that kind of information.
I think this was a great starting point and a great discussion, and I thank you both.